Exercise 1, Inventor Professional 2017. This exercise is going to explore the fundamental tools inside Inventor in the latest version of 2017. As you see the part that's in front of you, that's the part that we're going to learn how to model. It's going to incorporate extrusions, cuts, fillets, chamfers, and shelling. And we'll take a look at a little bit of photorealistic rendering inside Inventor as well. So let's begin. What you might want to do, if you want to grab the actual training guide, you could just go to the vertanu1.com webpage, VERTAN as in Nancy, UX1.com, and go to the instruction manuals and select Autodesk Inventor. The exercise begins on page 14. And so let's start. Start by going up here to the top to New, and you can select Standard iPart. Now remember that you have the ability to choose between metric, there's a metric folder right here, and English. And we want English in this case, so Standard iPart. Hit Create. Okay. If you're new to it, it brings up a tutorial guide in the front. Just go right to Start New Part. Okay, now with this, first of all, if you want to set the screen background color up like what I have, I just have it set to what's called Presentation. It's like a very bright white, just so it's easier to see on the screen. You go to File, and you go to Options. And the Options, or Application Options, appear. What you'll find there is under Colors, the Colors tab here, you can set it to Presentation, and then I usually just set it to one color. Again, you could select any of those, whichever one you prefer. Just note that some of the colors might look different than on mine, so be aware of that. Okay. Also with Display, depending upon your preferences, I usually use Application Settings. You could go to Settings in here, and I usually set the model edges to one color, so that way it's a little easier to see. I like to see ground shadows and object shadows, although that slows things down on tablets or slower computers, so be aware you might want to disable some of those. And the visual style I prefer is shaded with edges. As far as the other options, you could just leave those alone. And then over here, there's some other options you could choose from. I'm not going to play with those, but essentially there's a lot of your options right there. So go ahead and just, if you've changed anything, hit Apply, and then you could close it. Now, if we take a look here, this is the browser over on the left. This is going to keep history and track of everything that we do inside Inventor. On the top, you have your tabs here for the ribbon, and so you're able to do different things. Now, one of the most common things that people do by accident is they accidentally modify the tabs for your ribbon, and as well as a lot of students have a tendency to close this browser. So if you close that by hitting X, be aware to bring it back, you go to View, and then go to User Interface, and check on Browser, and that will bring it back. Okay, another thing students have a tendency to do, they minimize or they cycle through these things. So beware, if you click on this little button, it's going to truncate a lot of the options. And some people like that. Advanced users don't want to see everything. But you just keep toggling this little switch up here until you get it back to your preference. Okay, so since that's out of the way, now let's take a look. There's the origin folder here in the browser. Hit the little arrow to the left of it, and you'll see you have axes and planes to choose from. You could select these planes here. These are your paper, essentially, that you're going to draw your profiles on that will later be extruded or revolved or whatever features you decide to do. What we're going to do, you could also just go to the sketch, and if you click here, you'll see there's 3D sketches and 2D sketches. 3D sketches is more advanced. We're not going to cover that in this exercise, so stay away from that. We want, believe it or not, a 2D sketch because we use the 2D sketches to make the 3D model eventually. So click on Start 2D Sketch. And what it does is it will throw you into an isometric view. And you see the 3 planes, which are your paper. And essentially these are like YZ, XZ, and XY. Like the XY plane is typically known as your front plane. This plane, the XZ, is typically the top. And your right plane is the YZ. Now, depending upon what you're going to design, like let's say, for example, you were going to design a stapler, the right side profile of a stapler has a lot more detail than if you were to look at the top or the front, typically. And so you might want to sketch on the right side to get the most geometry in the profile versus just a rectangle that's going to be extruded later. So that's kind of the logic behind it, but really you could start anywhere you really want to. It's just design intent later on comes into play, and I might discuss that a little bit as we move through. But right now, just go ahead and select the XZ plane, which is the top plane here. You'll notice it orients you normal to the plane or parallel to it. What we're going to do now, you'll see there's a little yellow dot in the center. At least on mine it's yellow, yours might have a different color, but that's your origin. And be careful because that could be deleted. That point can be deleted. You could reset it with another point, but it's just easier if you just try not to delete it by accident. Okay, now you'll see the rectangle tool up here. If you hit the little arrow underneath it, you'll see there's several ways to create rectangles. There's even slots and arc slots and polygons. We're going to go with the 2-point rectangle to start with, but be aware for the labs that come right after this exercise that you pretty much want to do on your own, this 2-point center rectangle really comes in handy. So just be aware that that's there for symmetric parts. It's great. But here, we're going to go with the 2-point rectangle. And I'm going to glide up to that little point there in space, which is our origin. That's our 0 marker in space for 0, X, Y, and Z currently. And so once it turns green, or again, yours might turn to a different color, click. That means you snap to it. Now as you drag this out, you'll see that there's dimensions. The blue highlighted dimension, you could start plugging away right now. If you have your number locks on your little keypad to the right, you could go ahead and type in a value. Just be aware the number lock key has to be activated in order to get that to work. Or else you could use the numbers on top of your keyboard. But here, this needs to be 5 inches in height. So you don't have to type in 5.00, just type in 5, but don't hit enter. Instead, to add the next dimension, click on that dimension up top. And it disappears for a second, but that's okay because it's just getting out of the screen a bit. We could fit that. And this needs to be 3 inches, and this is the width. So just type 3 and hit enter. Now, on your right-hand side here, you'll see that you have the ability to go home, or you could rotate this with spin box. You could orient it different directions, things like that. And if you click on the home button, it brings you back to an isometric view. But let's just click on top here. Okay, now in this case, it's actually flipped 90 degrees. We could go ahead and rotate it with this tool and bring us to that orientation. So just be aware there's different ways of reorienting it. It really doesn't matter too much as long as you know where you're at with the part. You're fine. Okay, now with that, let's go ahead and go to the 3D Model tab up here. 3D Model enables you to do extrusions and revolves and holes and things. So click on the Extrude button. And click on Home just to let it zoom out a little bit there. And here you can see the extrusion depth. Now, this may not be active on yours. You might just have a little bar here. If you want to see all the details, which is great for a new user, click on that little black arrow and it will pull down. Otherwise, there's this little floater, which is essentially gives you all this a quick way to access, or a quick launch, you might call it. So if you really don't need to know all the little details, you could just plug in the numbers and hit the green check mark and you're set. Otherwise, you can plug it in over here. Let's work over here for right now. Now we have a distance that is set up, and we want it to go approximately 0.5. So click on that and type in 0.5, and you'll see it will automatically update. Go ahead and hit OK. All right, and now we have our monolith, you might say. So it's a solid. To rotate, you could grab this box with your left mouse button and just drag it. All right, or If you click on the corners, it brings you to different orientations. Or if you click on the faces of front, top, left, right, it goes normal to those orientations. And then to go back to home, just click on home. Now to do this manually, or dynamically I should say, if you hold your shift key down and hold the middle mouse button, or what is the scroll button, if you're pushing it down versus scrolling it, move your mouse left, right while holding shift, and you'll see you could rotate dynamically. Now if you use your scroll, release shift, use your scroll, you could zoom in and out. And you could focus on points and things to zoom in and out. So if you move your pointer over like a corner that you want to zoom up to and interrogate, just move up to it and scroll, and it will zoom up to that corner. So practice that. That's a very important part of learning the software, or learning how this works. It's just knowing how to orient it. Just like a child, when they are first brought into this world, they pick things up and they look at it, and they spin it around in their hands and they look at it. So that's a very important thing to learn. So if you want, pause it right now and just rotate and try those tools that I talked about. Give yourself a few minutes to play with it, and then come back. Otherwise, stay tuned. Okay, I'm going to go back to the home button, and now what we need to do is we need to put a block over this. So what you could do, you could sketch on planes like we did earlier, or you could actually sketch on surfaces as long as they're flat. They have to be flat or planar. They can't be curvy. So go ahead and just click, and you'll see there's three options. Now you have the ability to edit the original extrusion. That's the part that we're looking at currently, and we had a depth of 0.5. If we wanted to click on this and edit it, it would bring us back to that dialog box where we typed in 0.5. Otherwise, there's another option. There's Edit Sketch, which will enable us to edit the lines and the geometry and the dimensions of that, what we created earlier. Again, we don't want that just yet, but beware, remember that. That's very important. It enables you to change things. And then there's Create Sketch on the far right. This is to create a brand new sketch on the surface that you've selected. So go ahead and select Create Sketch. Okay. And again, you could go up here, hit this little arrow to the right. Now, if your orientation is different, don't be too worried. Remember, it's all going to come out just right as long as you kind of keep your mind oriented in 3D here. So with that being said, now I'm going to go ahead and go over here to the rectangle tool and click on, we're going to use 2-point rectangle again. Now move your pointer down to the lower left corner. You'll see the green dot again. Click, and I'll drag this over. Now what you want to do is you want to highlight, make sure that edge highlights. And what it's going to do, it's going to snap to that edge. And rather than using dimensions like a 3-inch dimension right there, let it snap, because there's two ways of constraining objects inside Inventor. There's actually dimensions, which we've just done earlier, and there's also constraints, or as you'll see up at the top there, which are common elements of geometry like coincident, parallelism, concentricity, tangency, things like that, which really make sketching much easier. Those of you who might have been exposed to older CAD systems where they didn't have constraints, you used to have to use all these drawing techniques and tricks to get things to line up. Now with these constraints, it makes your life a lot easier. So anyhow, let's go ahead and snap to this area here. You could, I guess, type in 1.5 for the height and then snap to that area. And unfortunately though, as you see, it didn't really take. So we're going to have to use the dimension tool here. So go up to dimension, click on it. Sometimes you could get that little line, but most likely not. So this is what you want to do. Click on this line right here, and then click on the line at the very bottom. Move your pointer to the right, and you can see a dimension that's there. Click again to drop the dimension so you could edit it. Type 1.5, and you can either hit enter or the green check mark. And now you'll see it aligns itself to 1.5 inches in height. Now, if you want, try that shift and the middle mouse button depressed and move your mouse left and right, up and down, and you could rotate this dynamically. Otherwise, feel free to use these tools again. The home tool is just fine. It's a quick way to get to an isometric view. Now let's go to 3D model and extrude again. Now it should remember the distance or the depth from last time of 0.5, and actually we don't want to change that. That's perfect. Just go ahead and hit OK, and now it's merged that block onto the other block. And it already does. Those of you, again, who've used older CAD systems that need where you apply booleans and things like that, you don't have to do a unite or a boolean union here. It automatically does it for us. Okay, now let's try and put a cut hole in here. So go ahead and select this face. Now when this pops up, could be a very useful thing. It's like a filter that enables you, wherever your pointer is, it will give you a selection of options that are close by. So it can be useful. I'll admit sometimes it could be an annoyance too, but if you don't know what you're doing. But go ahead and select this face. And remember there's the 3 options again, and we just want the create sketch, which is on the right. Okay, and again I'm going to rotate this. And I'm going to go over here to the circle tool, and just out here in the upper left quadrant, I'm going to click once, drag out a circle, and the circle needs to be 0.75. So you could type in 0.75, or if you click earlier, remember you could go to the dimension tool and just select the outside of the circle and add that dimension. So if you don't want to do it this way, you could do it that way. And remember there's the undo buttons up here. If you ever make a mistake, use undo. There's redo as well. Okay, you can see 0.75 in there. Now I'm going to position this, because right now it's not accurately positioned. We want to go to dimension, and we can position. You can actually select the outside of the circle or the center point. Outside's a little easier to select sometimes. We want to position it 1 inch off of this left edge. So click on that left edge, and then drag the dimension up and center it nicely, and go ahead and type in, it's supposed to be 1 inch off that edge. Okay, and hit enter. Let's do that again. Let's position it. Go ahead and select the circle and position a dimension, locating it from the center to this top edge. Oops. And then drag it to the left and position it centered and type in 1. And the only reason you want to position it centered or lay it out like you would a drawing, because later on when you learn how to create drawings, the 2-dimensional side of this, those dimensions will appear how you left them in most cases. So it saves some time having to move them, and you could pretty much just say drop in the dimensions, and there's a lot less work to have to do. Okay, now that it's in position, let's go back home and let's extrude that again, but removing material this time. So go to 3D model and click on extrude. Now sometimes it depends upon the geometry that's up on the screen, it will automatically select your profiles that might be enclosed, but in this case there are multiple edges that were already found. So go ahead and just click in the center of that circle when it turns this pale color, and you'll see it wants to extrude adding material to the top. We don't want that. In fact, you'll see that there's a couple options here on the left. If you click in this box to activate, you'll see this is to join, this is to cut. Click on cut, and it's usually pretty smart. Logically, it goes down and it cuts into the part, creating a void or a hole. Now, design intent would dictate, if you know anything about engineering, things change all the time. This fixture plate that we're making, or whatever it is, essentially might thicken one day to be 1 inch versus a 1/2 inch thick. Right now, with the distance set at 0.5, if someone ever changed the thickness of the plate, they would have to also change this hole depth because it wouldn't go through any further. So design intent would suggest another option for distance if you hit the little arrow. Design intent is your plan on how you want it to update and work later on. So instead of distance, let's take a look. You have to next, to, or between. All just means it's going to go through everything. Go ahead and hit all. Now be aware, if you ever do need to flip it or reverse the directions, these are for flipping it or going symmetric in both directions. Okay, so we'll use those later on. But go ahead and hit OK. And now if you rotate with the shift and the middle mouse button, you can see you have a hole. All right, let's get into this position here so we can see this side, this edge. The hole is on the back side there. Let's go and add some 3D model features. Click on the 3D model tab and find fillet. Fillet is like if you wanted to file something round so it's not as sharp. add like a sculpted shape to it. In this case, the radius, I'd like you to try a 1-inch radius. And in Inventor, you actually select the edge where, like, for example, the file would contact or the sandpaper would hit. You don't select, like if you're used to a 2D model or 2D sketcher, you would normally select the two intersecting lines on a planar view. That's not the case here. In this case, you just select where you would file it down, and there, click on that edge. Do the same over here. I just use my zoom in and out and my scroll, click on this one. And you can see those there. And here, if you want, you could just hit the green check mark, or you could hit OK up there. All right, let's try the chamfer now. Go to chamfer. And let's hit this little arrow here. Now you'll see there's distance to distance, angle to distance. Okay, so there's some different options here. Right now it's allowing to select edges. Go ahead and select this edge. Leave it at 0.125. Okay, or type in 0.125. And click on this edge. Now, because it's using both, it's making them both equal, 0.125 by 0.125, the angle is already defined at 45 degrees. But if you wanted to define a different angle, you would use the distance to angle. Go ahead and hit the green check mark when you have those two. All right, now we're going to make this a thin-walled part, like a plastic enclosure. So I'm rotating again with holding the Shift key down. Rotating. You could rotate to the bottom or whatever you want to do, but actually rotate it so it looks like mine. If you want, pause the video right now and take a few moments to rotate it. Again, it's excellent practice. I tell my students all the time, it's very important to learn how to manipulate and rotate to actually become proficient with the software early on. So take that time and get it to where it looks a lot like mine. Okay. So if you've got it in this position, now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the shell command. Click on shell. Shell enables you to hollow it out. And right now you can see a little preview inside there. It's going to hollow everything out inside there. You don't want a shell on top of a shell. So in this case, make sure you select the faces to remove. So right here you'll see remove faces. Make sure that button is pushed in. And select, oops, let's hit that again. You might have to hit remove faces again. I think it was actually selected and I clicked on it and maybe deselected it there, so my apologies. Go ahead and select the face you want to remove. In this case, this face, it disappears. Go ahead and select this face here, and then the side face. So notice those are the faces you're going to remove. Now also, instead of 0.1, how about 0.06? Make it a little bit thinner. And hit the green check mark when you're ready. Now you should be left with a part that looks like this. Okay, that finishes the exercise if you're interested in just basic modeling. But if you want to add some colors and use the render, I'm going to go through that right now. Otherwise, you could fast forward to the labs, which you'll see in just a moment, the labs that are in the book and the manual. By the way, let me show you in the manual here where we're at. Just completed, oops, on page 19, and then here on the page 20 is lab 1 and page 21 is lab 1B. So those ones will hit in just a minute, but first I'll show you some rendering tricks. Okay, so to change the color of your part, you have some generic colors to choose from, and I wouldn't say they're all that generic. I mean, you have polyethylene, you have lead, plastic, iron, grade, ductile iron, things like that. Then there's some more advanced options here from the Autodesk Inventor material library. And so if you really want to go all out, you could change those. What I'm going to go with here is I'm going to go ahead and find just a white finish. So it's alphabetic. So let's see, there we go. Just going to click on white. Okay, then if I wanted to, like let's say I wanted to change this a bit, like I have on the image that you saw earlier, you could control select these faces here. There's a couple different ways of doing this. You could select those faces that you want to change the color of, and then go over here and find, like for example, I had it green, so I'm going to go with dark green. Oops. Okay, and so essentially you could go ahead and change those materials as you like. Now, if you go to View, if you're going to photo render this, instead of orthographic, one thing that makes it look more realistic or appear more realistic is just like a real photograph, you have a vanishing point. As you notice, things get smaller the further they get away. So perspective gives you that. If you click on perspective, it gives it a little more realistic appearance. And the reason you might want to do some of this is either your company might want you to do it for marketing purposes or for your portfolio is what I recommend for my students. So once you have that in a position that you like, now you'll see that there's other visual style. You can go with realistic, and then it gives you a nice shaded kind of softer image. There's also other options like technical illustration, and then shaded shade with edges is what I was using earlier. It's if you like the shade with edges, that's it. But here's the thing: if you go to realistic, you'll see the ray tracing becomes available. Click on ray tracing, and you'll see over here you have low, draft, high. So the higher the quality you want, it usually looks better. Sometimes you have to fiddle with it a little bit. But anyhow, you could disable that. You could turn off ray tracing. Oops, up here. Ground plane puts a plane in the bottom, which you may or may not want. Textures you could turn on or off. Reflections, you could turn those on if you want to make it look a little like it's on a thing, or go to all shadows. So there's a lot of settings here. It even gets more detailed. If you go over here, go back, just go to, I think you could keep it realistic, go to environments and go to Inventor Studio. And in here there's more options. So for example, there's you could render the image right now, or you could go to the studio lighting, there's different options to choose from. View last. So there's a number of things you can do to make it look better, and so on. So if I go to render image, it brings up some options here, and you could select like the width and the height, or maybe you want it to fit on a 1080p screen, so like a screen background. So you could set it to 1080 right here. And then output, you could save it to a location, just browse wherever you want to put it and name it. And then the render, there's a render time, like if you want within so many minutes, get it to that level of detail, or until satisfactory, or render by iteration. Lighting materials I have set to high. The anti-aliasing, which smooths out the lines, Gaussian, and then just hit render, and you'll see it will generate. Now it was set to high, and I'm not always pleased with the high. It's just I don't use this all that often. I'm sure people can make phenomenal looking renderings, but this one generally looks pretty grainy. It will improve the longer you let it set, but actually draft isn't too bad. If you hit render, draft looks rather nice, and just let that go through its iterations as well. Now some other things you could do to make it look a little nicer. Under general, there's lighting style. You could choose different backgrounds, like for example a photo booth or plain room, and then hit render, and that helps make it look maybe a little bit better. So there's different backgrounds, and it highlights colors, and again I just chose very basic surface colors, so it's just like almost a matte plastic. It doesn't look all that great, but you can really dress it up quite a bit, playing and tinkering with it. You could just cancel this out. So all you do now is you just go to the little diskette up here, or you could go to File and Save, and then make sure you save this as E1, capital E1 for exercise 1. Alright, that finishes that exercise. Now if you wish, you could watch the videos. The continuation of this video shows you how to actually utilize or make the two labs. One last thing I forgot to show you. Those of you in my class who I recommend making a portfolio, if you want to make a portfolio at this time, this is where you would go to the Tools, or actually go to View and go to Realistic and do a ray traced image. And now what you can do is once that's up on the screen, you start up Microsoft Word or whatever tool you have, and you could go up here to Insert and there's Screenshot. You could take the screenshot off of the screen right there. It doesn't always work with the renderings. I've seen it do some weird things, like if I click on that, although that looks pretty good, although that I don't think is our actual rendering. So what you could do is you could click over here, and actually it might be, and you do an Alt, hold Alt and hit the print screen key on your keyboard. Print screen's up at the top right next to F12 and Alt at the same time. And now you could go in here and Control V as in Victor to paste it, and you'll see you have, it comes up. You could go click on the what it gave you, go to Format, and use the crop tool and grab these L brackets in the upper right corner and left corner and drag them in. Don't grab the centers because that skews the actual image and it looks very unprofessional. And then you could drag this out just by clicking off of it and on again. And like in this case, at the top I'll put exercise 1 enclosure. And this is nice for a portfolio piece, and you just keep adding to your portfolio using a Word document like this and go out, hopefully get a job with that. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. I'm going to start a new part. So remember, you could go to File, New, and select Part here, or you could go to the new part up there. So I'm going to go here, New, Standard I part, Create, and I'm going to start a sketch. And for this one, I'm going to use the XY plane. Again, if you want to use the XZ, either one of them is fine. Just click on it. It will orient you to that. Our goal in this one is to make that F that you see here. Okay, it's just like a letter F cut out of a 1/2 inch plate, and it's 2 inches in height, 3.5 width. So I'm going to use the line tool here. Click on line, start right at the origin, drag it up, and as you're doing this, you can actually type in the values, like 2 inches for the height. I'm going to click on front and it will zoom to fit. And now across here, just make sure you're 90 degrees, and that's supposed to be 1 inch. And then drag it down, and this is supposed to be 1 inch. And then drag it to the right, and this is 0.75. Again, I'm just working right off of the print and doing a little bit of math in my head to put these in. And then drag this up top here. Make sure to line, see that line? That's an inference line. Click, drag this across, and this one I believe is 0.75 again without looking at the print. And then this goes down a little bit further. Not sure what it is. And then this goes across. I think this is 0.75 again. And then, oops, I'm using my scroll here. Or remember, you can just click on front and it will zoom to fit. And then over here, we just click on this and then close it. All right, now I still have to add some dimensions. Like for example, this one right here, that needs to be 0.85. And that pretty much does it. I think we've got everything. So now I just go to 3D model. You could hit finish sketch. You don't have to though. Go to extrude, and it's supposed to be 0.5. And then save that as L1. Now the next lab, L2, again, use standard I part. Go to start 2D sketch. This one, either one, if you want, the XZ plane is fine, or XY. And this time, this is what I was telling you earlier, use the rectangle 2-point center. Because this is a symmetric part, you're going to click at the center and drag this out. Now it's, I think it's 3 by 5. Then just click on top there. Okay, and let's just take a look. And so with the length and width there, I'm just going to bring up the document and we'll take a look. And you can see it's 3 by 5. And then we have this, the overall thickness is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to actually use a tool here. I'm going to use the circle tool. I'm going to glide up around this area here. Be very careful. Don't lock your circle into the center lines. Stay away from the center lines. So I'm over here. I'm going to click. I'm going to drag out the circle. And this circle needs to be a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to go to the dimension tool and dimension from the circle to this edge of 0.75. And then the circle to this left edge of 0.75. Now, normally, I would have my students do this to all 4 corners, which is time consuming. There is a quicker way, and we cover it actually in exercise 2, which if you want to watch the rest of this series, it's like complete them, that will be available soon. But I'm going to go ahead and show you the shortcut for that. I'm going to go to the line tool and transform the line tool to a center line. Center lines are necessary in order to use for mirroring. So I'm going to lock into this vertical line here and click and just connect it to the origin. Click and drag out a horizontal line. Click and then hit escape to get out of the tool, the escape key. Now, the vertical center line is going to mirror this circle over to the right. The horizontal will mirror it below. You can only do one at a time, unfortunately, so you can't do like everything at one shot. So here's what we're going to do. Go to mirror, and it's on select, so we select what we want to mirror. Click on the circle. Now click on mirror line, this little button here, and click on the vertical center line and hit apply. And it should mirror it over to the other side. Now select both circles, click on mirror line, and select the horizontal center line and hit apply and hit done. So that's a little preview of what's coming up in exercise 2. We're going to do more mirroring, both feature mirroring as well as sketch mirroring like we just seen there. Okay, now I'm going to go to 3D Model, Extrude Boss. I'm going to go home here. Click inside this boundary. And if you click in the holes, it will fill them. You don't want to do that. You want those holes to be there. They're through. And the thickness is supposed to be 1.5 inches. Hit enter. Okay, now you can select this face, go to the Create Sketch tool, use the center rectangle again, 2-point center, lock into the origin, drag this out and wake up this edge on the right and click. Use your dimension tool to dimension between both of those lines, and that should be 1.5 inches. Now if you rotate with the shift and the middle mouse button, get it, or go home, either one is fine. And now go to the 3D Model, Extrude. And again, it wants to add material, but if you recall, you have the ability to remove material, or you could click flip the direction. And look at that, it automatically went to cut. Beware, it doesn't always do that. Depending upon the situation, it might not. But in this case, it works out for us, and it's only supposed to be 1 inch in depth. Go ahead and hit OK. And that finishes this lab. But if you're going to make a portfolio, I would recommend enhancing this a bit. Play with it and put fillets on and chamfer. So I'll just go through that really quick. Like for example, the fillet tool here. I'm going to go ahead and put in 0.75 for the radius and select all 4 corners. And I'll even select these inside edges here and here. Okay, now I'm going to go to chamfer, and 0.125 is just fine. Click on this edge and this edge. Hit OK. All right, so as you can see, you could enhance the image a bit. You can even go to fillet and put more fillets in. Fillets give it a nice sculpted appearance, as well as chamfers cast greater shadows. So if you want to make it look more dramatic, chamfers are nice, or fillets. In this case, I'm going to go with the 0.06 radius. And I'm going to select this edge here, and apply. And then 0.03, and I'm going to select this edge here and this edge here. And then I'm going to go down to 0.02 and select this edge and this edge. All right, let's go to the chamfer tool, and we could select these edges. It's like putting a countersink on there. There is the hole tool that enables you to put countersunk and counterbore features and things like that on a hole as you make it. We will cover that in the more advanced topics, so hit the green check mark. All right, and finally, we could go to try and shell this. Go to the shell command. Now, shell, depending upon the thicknesses of things, might not always work. I'm going to make it a 0.05, and then select remove faces. Oops. Okay, in this case, you can see it doesn't like that. Oh, because I forgot the decimal. So make sure you don't forget the decimal. Oops. We'll go with 0.02. And then remove faces. And let's see if we could select it. Face there. Okay, and hit OK. And there it is, shelled out. Again, feel free to use your different color palettes and things like that. So in this case, maybe we want this to look glossy gold. And then we could select maybe the countersinks or fillets or things like that to change those colors. So I'm going to go over here with those selected, and I'll select just gold. It's a little different. Now if you go to View, turn on Perspective, and you could go ahead and under Visual Style, change it to Realistic. And if you want to ray trace it, even make it look more realistic. Do your print screen, Alt Print Screen, drop it into image. So that concludes this exercise.